Welcome to The Karuna Life, a podcast dedicated to exploring the connection between spirituality and everyday life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. I'm an intuitive, a Reiki master teacher, Akashic Records facilitator, and founder of Trimatri Reiki. As a longtime spiritual seeker, my goal is to help you navigate the complexities of the spiritual world, learn how to enhance your intuition, and lead a heart-centered life. Join me as we unravel the mysteries of energy work and metaphysical practices. We'll dive into high vibrational conversations with experts and personal storytellers and learn how to recognize and communicate with those in spirit. So get ready to embrace your inner mystic and explore the realms of the unseen. Hello, and welcome to the Karuna Life podcast. This is Meredith Beardmore, and I am taking over today to interview Gina about her upcoming memoir, Soul Walk, The Unexpected Gifts and Grief and Connection to Those in Spirit. If you don't know me, I am an author and therapist, also a YouTuber. My channel is called Mend with Mare, and I react to music and lyrics through a therapeutic lens. I'm also written a memoir as well that's coming out the day after Gina's book comes out, and it is called The Plan B Chronicles Divorce, Defiance, Liberation. I am so excited to interview Gina today, and welcome to your own podcast, Gina. How are you? Thank you, Meredith. It feels very weird to be on the opposite side of this. Well, I am honored that I get to take over your podcast today and interview you about your amazing book, which I had the honor of reading a while ago. I think maybe a couple years ago, and it helped me tremendously. It met me at a time when I was supposed to read your book, and it gave me a lot of encouragement and understanding on so many different levels. And I am wondering for you, what inspires you to write Soul Walk and share these parts of yourself that are just so deeply personal? Well, really, it was kind of a gradual nudge that I received from my soul about writing this book. For those of you that don't know my story, I met and fell in love with my husband, Joe, at 15. And we both went on to have other marriages when we were in our 20s. And then we reconnected in our early 30s. And we went on to have two children. And I thought that this was the happily ever after story of my life. And we were together for several years. And eventually, though, my marriage became affected by alcoholism. We ended up separating, which I was devastated by. And then in 2018, he died by suicide. And I was left parenting two young children and trying to figure out exactly what had happened to my life. And so for me, grief was a lot of things. And I wanted to share my story in the hopes that it might help other people navigate similar challenges in their life, to really hopefully be a light for them in some areas. And if not, to be a companion and to help them navigate their own challenges and to begin to view grief in perhaps a little bit different way. And I'm really grateful that you did write this and could speak to this happening, because I can imagine the instinct could be to isolate or go inward because of the stigma around suicide and being a survivor of a loved one who dies by suicide. So was that the pivotal moment that shaped who you are in your life, or what would you say that would be? For me, it was really the couple years that the separation with my husband, his passing. Those are really formative years. Lee Harris says that grief is the great transformer, and I absolutely agree with it. It's a transformation that nobody wants or would wish upon. You don't decide next week this would be wonderful to go through it. It's a horrible experience, right? And yet there are different facets of it that I wanted to show. I think the fact that his death was by suicide, I felt
a real lack of information out there. I'm a reader. So when he passed, I was trying to find books. I was trying to find books on parenting because
Mhm.
there was nothing out there that talked about kind of the experience of being a parent, the experience of losing someone that I loved very deeply, even if we were separated. And there was so little. I think one of the books I read was traumatizing because it was going through these details of these horrible things that people had been through and the acts and how they were completed in front of, family members that it didn't make me feel better. And then on the other side, I couldn't find any books on parenting, like how do you parent young children? I had an 8 and a 10-year-old at the time. So you're trying to ask all those big questions, and to find that place of learning where to find your kind of anchor and navigate from, and there just was very little out there.
Yes, I feel similarly that about um, that I, as a mother, a single mother, I am curious about what that has been like for you as a mother going through that, like you yourself, Gina, going through it. And then how did you support your children through a loss like that without resources?
Yeah, I was terrified. I had been, living on my own because Joe and I had been separated for, I think it was about, almost a year, I think, before he passed. And I still remember being terrified and in my head asking myself, I don't know how to do this, right? I don't know how to be a single parent. And so it was learning to understand that children grieve very differently. And my sister was a really great resource because she's an elementary school teacher. So she helped me understand that it was going to look different. Because part of you as a parent, you want to almost force a conversation on your child, like, we're going to deal with this, we're going to talk about your emotions. And then at the same time, they really just need to be kids and to process and play and do all those things. That is their way of coping. And it's a real delicate balance between being available
Yeah.
and trying to have a conversation without forcing them into emotions that they aren't really wanting to experience. My kids were both, like I said, younger at the time. My daughter, he passed away 3 days before my daughter's 8th birthday, and my son was 10, and, they both really kind of went back into their normal routines much more quickly than I expected, and I wasn't really sure what to do with that, so it's allowing them kinda to have that space, and then I noticed as they got older, probably closer to age, like, 13, they both started processing it again very differently and on kind of that deeper emotional level, and I don't wanna speak for them, but my hunch is that some of those emotions of grief started to surface as they matured and were able to really start to process them.
Wow. So it's something that sounds like you don't just grieve it and then, you know, wash your hands of it and you're done. It's an ongoing process. And so how did that affect you though whenever you saw your kids going through it again when they were a little bit older? Like how did you handle that?
That's a good question. It's hard. Grief is I wish there was a finish line, but there's not. I have them both in counseling. I think it's important for them to have people that are outside of, myself and family to talk to help them start to process it and to kind of allow them to go as deep as they want to go and to set the pace themselves. I think I'm certainly not a counselor, but that's the way that I have handled it, and I feel like they kind of delve into it as much as they're ready to, and then ultimately, it'll kind of wait until they're ready to hit the next step.
Mhm. Now I know you because you are my Reiki master. You are a friend and a colleague, and I you have been invaluable in my life with the help and support that you have given me, and you are an intuitive healer, and I'm wondering, how did your intuition help you in this process of loss and healing?
Um, the intuitive process, I think, can be incredibly helpful when we're dealing with hardships. I know that when Joe and I separated, I was already talking with my spirit guides on a regular basis. And so I kept a notebook and I found their advice to be incredibly helpful and healing in terms of holding me steady during very rocky periods. And yet, I would say that my intuition was still in development because this was years ago. And so when Joe passed away, I really had a little bit of skepticism, and I had a message from Joe that came through very clearly a few days after he died. And I really wanted an outside validation for it. I wanted someone to tell me that this was him 100%. And so when I was at the funeral home, a fellow energy worker came up and I trusted her. And so I said, hey, Joe sent me this message and here's what it is. And she told me that it wasn't him. And I was devastated. And so that comment really led me down this path of really starting to look at those areas where I was giving my power away, where I was looking too much for an outside validation. And in hindsight, I'm actually really grateful for that comment because I ended up growing so much from it. And it really helped me to begin to gain confidence in myself and in my intuitive abilities. And I really think if it was over something that was maybe a little bit trivial, I might not have done that deep dive. But because this was so important to me, this communication with him, that I really dug in deep and really had to take a look at some of the areas that I might not have otherwise.
So many different things that I could say about that because I feel like I'm hearing that this, awful, awful experience that was met with by one person questioning how you heard something or received information from the other side after he passed, how it affected you and put you on this path of trusting yourself. Yet other people might not react like that at all to that. That could have been crushing. So I feel like it's a very big example of your resilience and your ability to make meaning of your own life and the power in it. Like I found that when I read the book so inspiring. And to also share that with us all, I think is so important. I want to shift gears a little bit because the book didn't just, focus in solely on the suicide and the aftermath of it all and healing with that. It discussed the challenges that Joe was really facing when it came to alcoholism. And as someone who went through a divorce with someone who struggled with drugs and alcohol and addiction, that was incredibly helpful for me. It made me feel less alone. I want to know what challenges you faced as a loved one of someone with addiction and alcoholism. And I can only imagine that would add to the complexity of the loss too later on. But I wanted to know, what was that like for you?
In terms of early on with his alcoholism, there were a lot of, I would say, kind of red flags, maybe. I'd known Joe since we were 15, but his drinking path kind of shifted and changed over the years where, you might have kids, you binge drink in college and you have fun and then they kind of like stabilize, right? And you become adults and parents and things shift. And I noticed with him, it really didn't. And so in hindsight, when I look back, I see that there were signs that I didn't see, didn't want to see probably, that there were those little like blips on the radar of like, this is abnormal drinking behavior, but you were like, oh, that's okay. It was a one-time occurrence. And to be honest, what had happened was that he would have those instances where it would go way out of line, right? And, then it would be kind of quiet, and he would kinda hold it together then for, 6 months, maybe a year. And I would think, "Okay, he's maturing, we're moving past this." But unfortunately, as he progressed in alcoholism, those instances became closer and closer together. So rather than it being once a year, it was every 6 months. Then after every 6 months, it became frequent, and then it was daily. And those behaviors that you have with an alcoholic, the, hiding, the lying, kind of all of those things that go with hiding this addiction for them really started to escalate. And my home, I would say, was quite dysfunctional, even though on the outside it looked fine. I had two young children. But I was really very kind of ashamed. I didn't want to admit to people what was going on behind closed doors. A lot of times in the beginning, I really wanted to be like the cool wife and to like somehow manage to fix this and, and not show that I was really upset. So I think I went through, and I'm sure you can relate to this. You go through like every emotion, right? You think if I can support them enough, if I can love them enough, if I get angry enough, and you try all these things and it's just exhausting until you finally come to that conclusion, that realization that this person is an alcoholic. And then how do I share that with family and friends in order to get the support that I really desperately needed at that time?
Do you feel as if you got that support?
Yes, I think overwhelmingly from people. I think most had started to see signs of it and behaviors of it by the time I really waited, probably months and months past when I could have started to talk about it. So I probably waited too long, if anything. But I think you go through all those emotions, you worry, right? I was worried, well, what if I tell people he has a drinking problem and then they think differently of him and then he becomes sober and it shifts things for them. You have all these things that go on kind of in your mind as you're trying to protect them. You're trying to help your marriage and your relationship as well.
And you think that other people can't see it either. So it sounds like the majority of people around you already were in the know and kinda waiting for you to acknowledge it as well.
Yes, as it progressed, his drinking, really over the course, I'd say over an 18-month period, escalated to the point where there was, things were really slipping through the cracks. You were seeing the mood changes, all of those things where someone is not just drinking, but excessively drinking throughout the day and having those blackout periods consistently. So, and really starting to really shift and morph the personality, by the level of drinking. And he even said, kind of after the fact, because he did find sobriety for about 5 years, that it really, the level of drinking that he was at, where he would kind of check out and then still be functioning though. And it's like you were seeing someone, often I would say his eyes were just like cloudy, like you would someone who was mentally ill because he wasn't there anymore, even though he was still functioning and doing things.
I'm always in awe of the fact that you are so intuitive, and I can't believe that you said earlier that you second guess yourself sometimes because I feel like you're just so firm in it whenever I've worked with you. And I am just curious about 2 things. I wanna know about how you developed your intuitive abilities, but also I'm wondering if people are interested in also developing their intuitive abilities, can they do it through the hardest time? I mean, my answer would be yes, because I document that in my book that you can. Sometimes that's almost what spurs you into being open to your spiritual world and abilities. But what do you think about that?
Oh, I absolutely think. I think that I always say it's kind of like a muscle. And if you continue to practice it, it'll get stronger. And I always say that it's important not to compete or to look at other people and try to focus on what someone else can do, but to focus on what you're getting, what you're receiving. And so for me, I'm a huge fan of automatic writing. That was just really was kind of my gateway into really communicating with my guides. I kept spiritual notebooks where I would ask them questions and get responses. And initially, they weren't very long responses. But over the years, as I continue to work that intuitive muscle, it got longer and more detailed. And then it's really learning to take that lean and to start to trust and to say, okay, well, here's what I'm getting. Like, this is what resonates with me. And when you can do that, it really begins to open things up. And I think they are able to come through in many different ways because you're taking that first step. And I think the first step is often the hardest.
Mhm. In the book, you talk about communicating with your husband intuitively, and I felt as if it gave me so much comfort that if the worst thing what felt like at the time when I was reading it, the worst thing to happen, if that happens, I could communicate with a loved one on the other side. And I feel like that's going to help so many people, especially those who have been affected by suicide. And what was that like for you? And what could you tell other people that are going through the same thing when it comes to being able to communicate after someone has died?
I think that it's kind of finding like your own lane and like your own technique. And I don't know if this is true. I've even asked my guides and I don't know that they agree with me on this, but for me initially when I was under the very, very heavy cloud of grief, I found it was a little bit harder to communicate. And I always felt like maybe the channel wasn't quite as clear because I've got, those heavy emotions and you're trying to process. And so it was really as I moved through the grief process and things started to kind of lighten a little bit that I found it was easier then to communicate with him. And I just almost kind of viewed it as like having this like rain cloud over me initially that I like so badly wanted to. And yet it felt like I was trying to talk through mud, and it what didn't feel very clear. But someone else may have a very different experience. But what I started doing that, just intuitively, and I've heard other people do this, so I'm certainly not alone, is I started having a cup of coffee with Joe in the morning. And I would put the kids on the bus and I would get a cup of coffee and just talk to him. And I would just tell him anything that was on my mind. Sometimes it was just, facts about the kids. Sometimes I was crying. Sometimes I didn't say anything, but I just would call him forward. And I just really had to trust in the fact that I knew he would come forward because I knew he cared about me and the kids. And that for me became a very healing process. And then as I moved through grief, then I was able to use automatic writing to start to really communicate with him. And you always have that human voice that says, "Oh, this is just you," right? Or you're just telling yourself what you want to hear. And I don't know that that ever fully goes away, that you just learn to kind of trust your heart and to say, "Okay, well, he can take it up with me in spirit." At the end of the day, I'm going to trust what I'm getting. And the more that I did that, the more I found peace in it. And sometimes he says stuff that I wouldn't say or I would think he would even say. And that's sometimes a really nice validation as well. But I think that we're going to start to see a real shift in how we perceive relationships after death, how we perceive those in spirit. And my goal has always been to help people really learn to navigate that for themselves to something that's a little bit closer to the truth rather than feeling your loved one is separate from you, that they are absolutely still with you, that you don't have to see a psychic medium per se to have those connections with them because that's kind of the old paradigm, right? I have to go and see someone. No, you have the conversation with them. It's your loved one
Mhm.
who you know them better than anyone. And you're certainly quite capable of that. And if I can help people begin to really start to form a new relationship, I think with their loved ones in spirit, that's really where my heart is at with this book.
I love that. Yeah, that definitely comes through in the book. Obviously, I have moments where I feel disconnected, and that's why I need help with that. But knowing that I do have the tools inside of me to connect has been really reassuring and encouraging. Where I'm like, I want to keep building them. Like, I feel like your book inspires just the average person. We just feel like, oh, put you up on a pedestal, because they're like, well, Gina has these special abilities and only she would know. But it's kind of cool to hear you talk about it and teach it too, because I've been in some of your courses and to see the fact that we all have that. We all have that ability. And I think you are going to be part of that change and kind of waking people up to how they can communicate with the other side. So I am curious though, if you could go back and speak to yourself at the very start of your journey, what would you say?
Oh, that's hard because I just feel like a completely different person. I would tell her that she has so much more power than what she realizes and that the time for playing small is done. And that even though she may not want to be in the transformative cocoon, that there are going to be good things that come out of it for her in ways that she has no idea and cannot foresee, and to just hold the course.
I think that makes me think of when I was in the transformative process, when I was writing my book and I was mad about it. Like I wanted to kick and scream. Did you have that same experience where you were like, I don't want to be going through this or evolving?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. In fact, I tell the story about when I first found out that Joe had passed away. I thought to myself at some point, like maybe it was a life lesson. And the thought that came through so clearly to me was that if this was a lesson, then I am not going to effing learn it. And as I had this emotion, it was so strong that this necklace that I wore on my neck exploded. It certainly is not something that I walked in and was like, "Oh, this is wonderful. I'm gonna learn these wonderful things." No, and then I think, my goodness, probably for the first year, I would just constantly ask my guides, "How much longer? How much longer am I gonna be in this valley? You know, you have to tell me, when does it start to lighten, because I've had it, I'm done." And I think that is the reality of grief, and that we can talk about both, right? That it is that hard valley of darkness that you don't know when the light is gonna start to shine back again. When I look back, there isn't really a distinct period that I can say that was when the light came back. It's so subtle. And it's like these little rays of sunlight just slowly start to change and shift your surroundings. And then all of a sudden, you kind of realize that you can catch your breath a little bit. And sometimes that might only be for a day, but you start to get those windows of reprieve. And then you start to see that you are healing.
That's really comforting to hear, as someone going through some grief in this moment. I I have to ask, what did you feel like that symbolized, or what were they trying to tell you when you doubted yourself and it exploded?
You know, I've never asked my guides that question. So let me see if they want to chime in on that one and ask.
Because I feel like I have an idea.
Well, you could certainly share yours. I do think that I have a lot of they're laughing, they're saying attempts in past lives around this theme and around grief. And there were a lot of times that I did not want to learn around loss. And I think in this lifetime, I have chosen a little bit different path. And they always tell me it's not that it's better, but that I have chosen to look at it a little bit differently and to have a different experience of grief in this life.
When you told it, I was thinking of when you said you would have told your I mean, it would be your younger self, I guess, at the start of your journey that you weren't gonna play small anymore, and really that you're more powerful than what you realize. And I think that it was symbolizing that, like, when you went back to a mindset that was, "Well, I'm not gonna learn this," and it's like, "Yes, you are, because you are powerful, and so powerful that they're speaking to you and they have that explode." I mean, that is powerful. It's wow. Um, okay, I wanna ask you, as we're wrapping up, what do you hope readers take away from Soul Walk?
My hope is that they realize that grief is not just one thing. At least that wasn't my experience. You know, there are absolutely all the hard emotions of grief. I wish I could say that we don't go through it, but we do. And so I don't want to take away from that, but it also can be a lot of different things. That when I looked at Joe's death, it really was a lot of different things. It showed me the support of my family and friends. It showed me the support of God. And, you know, those moments where I was really needing help and assistance, that the divine would come through, that my team in spirit would come through. So there were moments of laughter. There were moments of really family bonds and friends and bonds that I would have never experienced. And I had to learn so many different things through it, like asking for help, which I was and still am not very good at. But in those moments, I had to learn to rely on my community and to actually accept help and to ask for it. So there were all these really beautiful gifts of giving and receiving that I had to learn through this, so that it really was so much more than just one thing. And I hope that anyone going through it will be open to really exploring it a little bit more, to looking at their narratives around death and the person who is in spirit, and maybe start to shift those to something that feels more in alignment with them, rather than just the old status quo of they're gone, they're no longer with me. Or even worse, when they feel like they're not interested in their life, they'll say like, "Oh, they must not care, right? They're in heaven, they're busy." Like, no, they're invested, they love you, they wanna help, they can help, and the more we can open to that, I think we can shift that dialogue.
Oh, I love it. So tell everyone when the book comes out, where they can get it, all the goods.
Well, the book is due to be released on July 7th. You'll be able to get it on Amazon. And we are also doing a special promo on July 2nd and 3rd. So if you follow me on Instagram, which you can find me at the Karuna Life, I'm going to be offering a special promo code so that you can get the ebook for only $1.99, but it's only for 2 days. I also wanted to note that if anyone is interested in my work, since I do see clients both in person and remotely, they can find my work on my website and see what offerings I have. I have an upcoming online Reiki class, and I'm going to be leading the annual Soul Rise Women's Retreat here in Columbus, Ohio in July, which I'm really excited about.
It's so exciting. And I know that this book is going to heal and help so many people. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being with me today, Meredith. This was really fun to get to switch and be on the other side. So, if anyone is interested in learning more, I will put all the information about Meredith's work as well as mine in the show notes. So, you will have all of that. As always, if you liked this podcast, please consider leaving us 5 stars and following. We'd be really grateful. And if you have any comments or topics that you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to email me, Gina at thekarunalife.com. I'd love to hear them. Take care and have a great day.